I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The coffee shop on 8th in Maine was the kind of place you didn't really notice unless you had time to kill. Dim light, that slow drip of conversation, the soft scrape of spoons against mugs. I came here most mornings, not for the coffee, which was just okay, but for the quiet routine. I'd sit by the window, stir my black coffee 3 times, then set the spoon down just so, fingers twitching slightly as I folded the napkin into a neat square. She was there that morning, leaning against the counter, the way she always was, mid-40s, maybe a little older, with that effortless calm that made the air around her feel warmer. I'd known her for years, but only as my friend's mom. That's how I still thought of her, mostly. The kind of person you never imagine seeing outside the usual places. "Hey, Jake," she said softly, a quiet surprise in her voice that caught me off guard. I blinked, caught off guard not just by her greeting, but by the way she said it, like she'd actually been thinking about me. "Morning," I said, clearing my throat. My order was already waiting for me. Black coffee, no cream, just like always. She smiled, a small, quick upturn of the lips, and added, "You've been on my mind." I looked away for a second, caught in the flutter that ran through me. There was nothing dramatic in how she said it, just the honesty behind the words that made everything feel a little heavier. My eyes flicked toward her hands resting on the counter, fingers tapping lightly, as if she wasn't sure she should have said that at all. I wanted to say something clever. Instead, I just said, "Then let me stay there." The words felt fragile, like a glass about to slip from my fingers. For a moment, we stood there in the quiet hum of the cafe, the ticking clock on the wall, the distant hiss of the espresso machine. Neither of us sure what came next. I caught the scent of her perfume, faint, a mix of cedar and something soft, and for a second I wondered if she noticed how I kept folding and refolding my napkin, a nervous habit I'd never mentioned. She glanced at me, eyes holding a question I didn't know how to answer. Most days, I kept my loneliness in small places. Unsent texts lingering on my phone, fingers hovering over the screen before retreating, half-written messages never quite brave enough to send. Or long pauses in my thoughts where I'd start to imagine someone noticing, really noticing, and then pull back before it got complicated. That morning was different. The air between us felt charged with the kind of quiet that fills up a room without a word. When she spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back today." I shrugged, not trusting myself to explain why I had. She smiled again, but it was softer this time, like she was holding back something she wanted to say but couldn't quite. As I left the cafe, my steps slow, I felt the weight of something unspoken settle between us, heavier than the morning chill outside. The lingering warmth of her words stayed with me longer than the coffee ever could. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed, a message from her. Just 3 words, "Can we talk?" And just like that, everything shifted. The cafe had emptied out by the time she and I sat at a small corner table, the afternoon light soft and a little lazy through the windows. She had ordered tea this time, a pale green steaming quietly between us. I watched the way her fingers curled around the warm cup, careful but steady, like holding onto something fragile. "I wasn't always good at saying what I felt," she said, voice low, almost like she was confessing to the empty room rather than to me. After Mark and I split, I spent a long time just existing, not really living. The mention of her ex-husband, my friend's dad, pulled at something tight inside me. A reminder of why this was all tangled. Not just the age gap, or the fact that I was close enough to her family to know how carefully all of this needed to be hidden, but because it felt like stepping into a place that wasn't mine. I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. "I get that. Sometimes it's easier to just freeze in place." She smiled softly, a little sad. "Yeah, I used to think I had to have it all figured out. Now, I'm learning it's okay not to." There was silence then, the kind that doesn't scream but hums quietly between 2 people trying to find their footing. I felt the awkward weight of it, wanting to say something true but not wanting to cross a line. My eyes drifted to her hands again, and I caught the flicker of a scar on her wrist. "That?" I said softly, nodding toward it. "What happened?" She glanced down, then back at me, her gaze steady. It's from when things were at their worst. I guess some memories don't fade as easily. I didn't ask more. Sometimes silence says what words can't. Helping her fold up a stray napkin felt like an excuse to close the space between us without words. My fingers brushed hers, a touch so light it might have been accidental, but her eyes met mine with a calm that surprised me. I know this is complicated, I whispered, but I think about you more than I probably should. She didn't look away. Me too. The moment lingered, a quiet, fragile thread stretched taut between us. No promises, no declarations. Just two people leaning into something neither of us was sure we were ready to name. As I walked away later, her voice caught softly behind me. Jake! I turned. She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need explanation. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought later, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The days after that afternoon blurred together in a strange rhythm. Small messages, brief encounters, quiet glances. But then, just as I felt something was about to settle between us, she pulled back. It was a Thursday. I found her at the bookstore, the one near the corner where she sometimes worked part-time. She was shelving books, calm as ever, but when I walked over, her smile faltered just a bit. Hey, I said, trying to catch the easy tone from before. Hey, she replied, eyes briefly meeting mine, then darting away to the books in her hand. There was something in the air, a pause too long between words, a shift I couldn't name. Busy day? I asked. She nodded, but didn't say more. We stood there, 2 inches apart, but worlds away, the silence stretching thin. I wanted to reach out, touch her hand again, but my fingers stayed by my side. Instead, I fiddled with the corner of a paperback, heart drumming louder in the quiet. From behind, a voice cut through the stillness. Jake! It was my friend, her son, stepping between us, eyes curious but cautious. She stiffened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. Hey man, I muttered, stepping back, the space between us snapping open like a wound. Hey, she said, voice softer now, almost too soft. I caught a glimpse of her hands, tense, gripping the edge of the shelf like it was holding her up. That night, I replayed the moment over and over. The way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The way my friend's sudden arrival shifted everything, like it had pulled a veil over us. Days later, we met again in the quiet corner of that same cafe. This time, the tension was sharper, the silences louder. We talked in broken sentences, eyes flicking to mouths, but never quite meeting lips. When she reached out to brush a strand of hair behind my ear, I caught my breath. Her hand lingered, too close to retreat, but not quite brave enough to stay. I leaned in, half out, the world narrowing to that moment suspended between almost and never. She pulled back just enough to stop it, just enough to leave me wondering what might have been if only we'd crossed that line. The park bench was slick with rain, though the storm had passed hours ago. We sat side by side, neither of us speaking much, the quiet broken only by the occasional drip from the leaves above. My jacket still smelled faintly of smoke, hers of something clean, soap, maybe. I saw you with her today, I said finally, voice low, careful. Not angry, but not quite calm either. She didn't look at me. Instead, her eyes traced the cracked pavement beneath us. She's just a coworker, she said. The words felt flat, but I could hear the weight behind them. I wanted to believe her, wanted to tell myself it was enough. But the knot in my chest wouldn't loosen. It's not about her, I whispered. It's this. Us. What we're trying to do. Her hand twitched, resting inches from mine, like it was both desperate to reach out and terrified to cross the line. I'm scared, she said, of messing everything up, of losing control. I swallowed hard, watching the faint tremble in her fingers. Me too. We sat like that for a while, the silence folding around us like a fragile truce. I don't know how much longer I can pretend this isn't complicated, I admitted, voice barely above the rain's echo. Her glance finally met mine, eyes searching, uncertain. What if we're fooling ourselves? The question hung between us, fragile and raw. And just as I was about to answer, or maybe ask the one thing that would change everything, the world paused. What do we do now? The days after that park bench stretched out into a strange silence. She stopped texting first. No morning hellos, no casual check-ins. When I showed up at the cafe, her usual corner seat was empty. The warmth between us cooled to a quiet distance I couldn't bridge. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of her across the street, talking with a man I didn't recognize. The way she laughed was lighter than I remembered, but something in her stance was guarded, careful. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message that never arrived. I stared at the blank screen, thumb hovering over her name. I wanted to ask about the man, about the past she'd never mentioned, the ex she hinted at once, and the child she once said was hers alone to protect. But the words got stuck. Hope twisted into confusion, and confusion folded into withdrawal. I replayed our moments together, searching for the sign I'd missed, the line we never crossed. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And the chair where she used to sit stayed empty. The kitchen light was low, just enough to catch the steam rising from 2 half-empty mugs. We sat across from each other, the table a quiet barrier that felt thicker than it should. Outside, the street was silent, the world holding its breath. She looked at me, eyes steady but tired. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, voice soft, almost a whisper. I nodded, feeling the weight behind the words. Not just the fear of what we were, what we might become, but the cost of breaking what little was left. "I'm scared too," I said, fingers tightening around my mug. "But maybe it's worse if we don't try." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, a slow breath. "I'm afraid of losing you, and losing myself." We sat with that, the silence stretching and folding around us. Then she reached out, her hand brushing mine. Careful, real. I smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because in that small touch, we both chose to keep trying. "Okay," she said, and that was enough. Months later, the cafe on 8th and Main felt different, quieter, warmer in a way that didn't need words. I was back in my usual spot by the window at 8:47 a.m., stirring my black coffee 3 times before setting the spoon down just so. She sat nearby, the faint scent of green tea drifting from her cup. We didn't talk much about the past or the near misses that filled those early days. Instead, we shared small moments, a nod over a quiet laugh, hands brushing briefly as we reached for the same book, the familiar rhythm of 2 people who knew each other without needing to say it. One afternoon, we found ourselves on that same park bench, the rain long gone, the air cool and steady. She smiled at me, soft, real, and I felt the weight of everything that had come before settled gently behind us. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. And as I watched her fingers curl around her tea, I thought quietly, some sentences don't need an ending. Sometimes, just letting them unfold is enough.